Agriculture is by far the most important thing that human beings do. And if we don't get it right, then we'll all go hungry. No, we won't all go hungry. But if we're not well fed, then the human race is seriously compromised, could never be properly fulfilled. And if we don't farm in wildlife-friendly ways, then the cause of wildlife conservation, I reckon, is more or less dead in the water, or at least is seriously compromised. So unless you put agriculture right at the center of your thoughts, you're going to almost certainly mess things up, which we are doing wonderfully at the moment. But governments like ours, or indeed most governments worldwide, really don't take agriculture seriously. They spend a huge amount of time on it, they spend a huge amount of money on it, which is mainly our money, but they don't really engage with it. They don't really appreciate how significant it is and how much goes into it and how it really works. And as far as they're concerned, well, I heard an adage when I worked briefly for Farmers Weekly in the early 1970s, agriculture is just a business like any other. And that's the way it's looked at, a business like any other. And these days too, the technology of agriculture, the actual practice, is really seen as a branch of biotechnology. Agricultural research is now part of the BBSRC, Biological Scientific Research Council. Agriculture's in there somewhere, but you have to look for it. I would suggest that we should put agriculture right at the heart, right at the center of all our concerns, and then build everything else around it, including the economy and the way we govern the world and all the rest of it. And instead, governments do it the other way around. They start with a political and an economic ideology, whichever the ideology is of the day, and then they try to ram agriculture into it. And at the moment, the main concern of the governments like ours is to ram the square peg of farming into the round hole of neoliberalism. And they consider that to be realistic. And if you talk about things like ecology and feeding people well and spirituality and all those other things, well, that's for the birds. The real point is that it's a business like any other, and that its job, therefore, in a neoliberal economy, is to maximize wealth. One huge question, which lots of people here wrestle with, is whether the sort of neoliberal mindset is compatible with the agroecological mindset that we're trying to promote. And there are a few signs that it might be, because some people farm very, very well, agroecologically and so on, and they make money. So this is seen as proof that you can, in fact, farm ecologically and also make money, and therefore everything's okay. But in actual fact, there's a huge difference between agriculture that's designed to maximize wealth and agriculture which emphasizes the importance of the ecosystem as a whole and the importance of human life, way of life. And just rapid sort of contrast, mainstream agriculture is about maximum input to produce maximum yield. Real farming is low input, which means it's basically organic, designed to produce enough, bearing in mind that the principle of enough's enough. Mainstream agriculture leads us towards monoculture, whereas agroecological farming, maximum diversity. In structure, commercial agriculture, mainstream agriculture, is irreducibly simple, but all that goes with it, the infrastructure that goes with it, the economic ins and outs and the political ins and outs, are infinitely complex. With agroecological farming, it's the other way around. The husbandry is very complex, but the basic sort of structure, the political structure, is very simple. Basically, you feed primarily into local markets. And whereas commercial agriculture, mainstream agriculture, is very simplified, the idea is that you could do it with very little labor, and so it aims for zero to minimum labor. Whereas the complex farming that we're talking about, agroecology, very diverse, etc., is skills intensive. So you need loads of farmers. And whereas it follows from this, mainstream farms are supposed to be as big as possible. As Earl Butz said in the 1960s, get big or get out. If you have loads and loads of farmers, which I'm suggesting we should have, then the farms have got to be commensurately smaller, small to medium size becoming the norm. The neoliberal economy that props out mainstream agriculture is maximally competitive, in fact, ruthlessly so. Whereas the economy that props out agroecology is fundamentally cooperative. The question is then, which should be privileged? Should you privilege agroecology or should you privilege the neoliberal economy? Well, I have no doubt, and I think most of you have no doubt, that we should privilege agroecology. But governments don't think like that. And I was watching this morning, yesterday I was watching Rishi Sunak's beginning of the year address to the faithful, and he basically said, we should be cheerful, we should be optimistic because it's the beginning of the year. And I thought that's not reason enough, actually, to be optimistic. And this sort of ultimately facile, fatuous comment. I watched Keir Starmer this morning, because I'm too deaf to come to the conference, but I watched Keir Starmer on the television, who has subtitles, and I wish we had subtitles here, but he was much better. He was actually rather good. And he spoke about all the real problems that face this country, the NHS, housing, education, the whole lot, basically, and it's everything, all public services are under stress. But the one thing he didn't mention was agriculture. Agriculture is, as I say, central, and it's as stressed as anything else. But it's simply not on the Labour Party's radar. It's basically an urban party. What we need then and this is the whole point, is a complete rethink, absolutely across the board, not just farming itself, but everything that goes with it, the economy, the governments, science, what we mean by morality. And right at the bottom, the thing that really interests me these days is metaphysics, which I won't discuss here, but I'm going to expand upon in future times. And Keir Starmer, funnily enough, said much the same thing. We need a complete rethink, he said. But as I say, he failed to mention the thing that should be right at the heart, which is agriculture. So if we're going to have this renaissance, we have to do it ourselves, human beings, people at large. And you are already doing it. And the whole point of the ORFC and the college is to help to provide some of the big ideas that must underpin this renaissance. And that's what I think is being achieved. I expand on all these ideas in my book, which is called The Great Rethink, and I expand on them further in my new website, which is called colintudge.com, www. So I'd be very pleased if you looked at it, and even more pleased if you commented, provided it's a nice comment. So thank you very much for listening.